A small-town mechanic saves a runaway bride. She's a millionaire escaping her fate. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is now. Subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Rain lashed the windshield of David Monroe's pickup, the wipers a frantic heartbeat against the storm. The mountain road, a ribbon of black slicing through cedar and shadow, was empty, except for her. A flash of white in the ditch like a crumpled flower. David's foot eased off the gas, his eyes narrowing. He pulled over, gravel crunching, and killed the engine. The world was all water and wind. He grabbed his flashlight, the beam cutting through the downpour. There she was, half curled in the mud, her wedding dress torn, soaked, clinging to her like a second skin. Auburn hair plastered her face, hiding her features. David's breath caught. He'd seen too many accidents as a mountain rescue volunteer to hesitate. He knelt, his flannel sleeve brushing her arm. She was cold, but her chest rose faintly. Alive. "Hey," he said, voice low, calm. "Can you hear me?" No response. His fingers found her pulse, weak but there. The dress, once elegant, was shredded at the hem, her bare feet scraped raw. No shoes, no bag, no car in sight. Who was she running from? David slid an arm under her shoulders, another under her knees, lifting her with practiced ease. She was light, fragile, but her hand twitched, clutching a silver locket, its clasp loose, threatening to fall. He carried her to the truck, settling her in the passenger seat. The cab smelled of oil and pine air freshener, a stark contrast to her faint perfume, rich despite the rain. He cranked the heat, draping his jacket over her. The hospital was 20 minutes away, a straight shot through the storm. David drove, glancing at her every few seconds. Her head lolled against the window, lips parted. "Hang on," he muttered, more to himself. The road blurred, rain a relentless drum. His mind flicked to his sister, Lily, how she'd run, how he'd failed to bring her back. Not this time. The hospital's fluorescent lights stung as David carried her through the ER doors. Nurses swarmed, a doctor barking orders. "Female, late 20s, unconscious, possible hypothermia," David said, his voice clipped, practiced. They took her, wheeling her away, and he stood there soaked, his boots leaving puddles. A nurse handed him a clipboard. "You her husband?" "No, found her on Route 17. He scribbled what he knew. Nothing, really. Name, unknown. His hand steadied, years of rescue work kicking in. He should have left then. His shift at the garage started at dawn, but he sank into a plastic chair, the waiting room a hum of beeps and murmurs. His cap sat in his lap, his fingers tracing its frayed brim. An hour passed, maybe two. The storm outside softened, but his chest stayed tight. A nurse appeared. "She's awake, stable. You can see her." David nodded, standing, his knees stiff. The hallway smelled of antiseptic, each step echoing. "Room 104. He knocked lightly, pushing the door open. She sat up in the bed, an IV in her arm, her eyes sharp but wary, flicking to the door as if expecting pursuit. The locket rested on her chest, its chain glinting under the hospital gown. Her face was pale, bruised along one cheek, but striking, like someone who belonged in a city penthouse, not a ditch. "You're the one who found me," she said, her voice hoarse but clear. "Yeah, David." He stayed by the door, hands in his pockets. "You okay?" "Susan," her lips pressed tight as if the name cost her something. "Thank you." He nodded, searching her face. She wasn't just shaken, she was scared. "What happened out there?" Her gaze dropped to the locket, fingers curling around it. I don't know where to start." Then barely a whisper. "James." The name slipped out, laced with fear, not love, her eyes darting to the door again. David's jaw tightened. Whoever James was, Susan wasn't running to him. She was running from him, and that changed everything. The hospital room hummed with the soft beep of monitors, a sterile cage of white walls and starched sheets. Susan sat upright, her eyes darting to the door, as if James might barge through. David leaned against the wall, his flannel shirt damp from the storm, his presence calm but unobtrusive. Her whispered James lingered, a warning he couldn't ignore. "You don't have to talk," he said, voice low, gentle. "But you're safe here." Safe. The word felt fragile, and her fingers tightened around the locket, its loose clasp glinting faintly under the fluorescent light. She didn't answer, just stared at the IV in her arm, her posture rigid. A nurse bustled in, sneakers squeaking. "Need to check your vitals, hun." She handed Susan a small mirror, a routine gesture. Susan took it, hesitant, and caught her reflection. Her breath hitched. The bruise on her cheek stood out, purple against pale skin. But it was her expression, haunted, trapped, that made her freeze. The mirror trembled, and David stepped closer, instinct sharp from years of mountain rescue. "You okay?" he asked, softer now. She nodded, too quick, and set the mirror face down. The nurse, oblivious, scribbled on a chart and left, the door clicking shut. Silence stretched, heavy. David shifted, his boots scuffing the linoleum. "Found a guy once, stuck in a ravine," he said, breaking the quiet. Scared out of his mind, but he kept talking about his dog waiting at home. Kept him going. He paused, watching her. Sometimes talking helps. Susan's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "You're good at this. Saving people." Her voice was raw, but a spark of defiance flickered in it, cutting through her fear. He shrugged, hands in his pockets. "Just don't like seeing folks hurt." She looked away toward the window where drizzle streaked the glass. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she murmured. "Not like this." Her fingers traced the locket's edge, a nervous tick. David noticed the engraving, initials, EM, and sensed it wasn't hers, but he didn't press. Not yet. "Who's James?" he asked, keeping his tone even. Her shoulders stiffened, her gaze snapping to the door again, as if the name summoned a threat. "Someone I was supposed to marry," she said, the words clipped. "Someone I didn't choose." Her eyes met his, fierce but softening as she exhaled. "I ran. That's all you need to know." David nodded, letting it sit. He'd seen pain like hers before, in his sister Lily, who'd run and never came back. He pushed the memory down, focusing on Susan. "You need to call someone? Family? Friends?" "No." The word was sharp, final. She clutched the locket tighter, as if it held her together. "There's no one." Her voice wavered, and he knew she was lying, but he didn't push. The clock above the door ticked, each second louder. A tray rattled in the hall, and Susan flinched, her eyes darting to the sound. David's jaw tightened. Whoever James was, he'd left scars deeper than the bruise on her cheek. The nurse returned, holding a clipboard. "Doctor says you're clear to rest here tonight. We'll need a contact number, though." She glanced at David, then Susan, expectant. Susan hesitated, her fingers still on the locket. I don't have one right now." Her voice was small, and David caught the truth. She'd fled with nothing, no phone, no cards, to avoid being tracked. "I'll vouch for her," David said, surprising himself. "She's with me until she's ready." The nurse raised an eyebrow but nodded, jotting something down before leaving again. Susan stared at him, her expression unreadable. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, almost accusing. "You don't know me." David rubbed the back of his neck, hands in his pockets, his cap tucked under his arm. "Don't need to know you need help." He paused, then added, "I've been where you are. Not the dress part, but running. It's not always the answer." Her eyes searched his, looking for a lie, but found none. She leaned back, exhaustion winning. As she closed her eyes, drifting toward sleep, David saw the locket's initials again. EM. Not hers, but a secret she held tighter than her fear. And that secret, he realized, was why she'd run. The hospital discharged Susan at dawn, the sky a bruise of gray beyond the windows. David stood by the desk, signing forms, his flannel shirt wrinkled from a night in a plastic chair. Susan clutched a paper bag with her locket and a borrowed sweatshirt, the torn wedding dress gone. Her posture was tight, her gaze scanning the lobby like she expected James to appear. "Where to now?" David asked, his voice low, gentle. She hesitated, fingers tracing the locket's loose clasp. "I don't know." Her voice was small, but a spark of defiance lingered. David nodded, tossing her his truck keys. "Come with me." The drive to his house was quiet, the engine's hum filling the gaps where words failed. His small-town home was a single-story clapboard, paint peeling, with a sagging porch and wild grass rustling. Inside, it smelled of wood and motor oil, the furniture worn but clean. Susan stood in the living room, arms folded, her tension palpable. David gestured to a hallway. "Guest room's that way, bathroom's next to it. I'll get breakfast." She nodded, her steps silent on the hardwood. The guest room was sparse, a twin bed, a quilt his mom made, a dresser with a chipped mirror. She sank onto the mattress, the locket heavy, its initials, EM, a quiet reminder of her mother. The weight of her escape pressed down, sharper now. David knocked, holding 2 plates of toast. "Hope you like plain." He set one on the dresser, keeping his distance. She took it, the warmth grounding her. "Thanks," she said, her voice softer, but her gaze stayed low. He leaned against the doorframe, his presence calm but searching. You don't have to tell me anything, but you're safe here. Safe. The word still felt fragile. She nibbled the toast, her mother's courage a distant echo, and felt her walls tremble. They sat on the porch, the air cool, the wild grass rustling. David's hands rested on his knees, steady from years of fixing engines. She noticed a faint scar on his chin, a story untold, and wondered what shaped him. You live alone? She asked, deflecting. Yeah, just me. His voice was even, but a shadow crossed his face. He stood grabbing a photo from inside. A young woman, laughing with his warmth. My sister, Lily. He paused, his thumb brushing the frame. She's gone now. Susan's chest tightened. I'm sorry. The words felt small, but she meant them. His loss mirrored hers, an unexpected bridge. He shrugged, setting the photo down. Life happens. But his fingers lingered, betraying the weight. She wanted to ask more, but her own secrets choked her. The locket felt heavy, her mother's voice a whisper. Live your own life. They ate in silence, the toast crunched loud. Susan's manners slipped out, napkin folded, spine straight, clashing with her haunted air. David noticed his brow furrowing, recalculating her story. You're not just some runaway, are you? He said, not accusing, just curious. Her throat closed. She could lie, but his honesty, his house, Lily's photo, demanded truth. My family, right? They're rich, powerful. The words spilled, bitter. They wanted me to marry someone, for business. I fled with nothing, no phone, no cards, to avoid being tracked. Her defiance sparked, a hint of the fight she'd soon wage. David leaned back, processing, his expression shifting subtly, like he saw her anew. So you ran, in a wedding dress. She laughed, sharp and short. Stupid, right? But her eyes stung, shame rising. She'd had everything, money, status, and still felt trapped. Nah, he said, shaking his head. Takes guts to run. His voice held respect, not pity, and it cracked something in her. She looked away, her fingers on the locket. E.M. Her mother's courage, not hers. David's photo sat inside. Lily's smile a ghost. Susan realized he saw her, not as an heiress or victim, but as someone fighting, like he once did for his sister. That shift, his belief in her, made her feel exposed but not alone. He stood clearing the plates. Get some rest. We'll figure it out. His back was to her, but his words landed soft, a promise. Susan watched him, her heart unsteady. He didn't see her wealth or shame. He saw her, and that, more than the locket, made her wonder who she could be. The porch swing creaked under David's weight, the morning air cool with the scent of cedar. Susan stood by the railing, her borrowed jeans loose, the locket a steady weight at her chest. 2 days had passed since the hospital, and the silence between them crackled with unspoken truths. She dodged his questions, her polished deflections thinning. You can't stay here forever, David said, his voice gentle but firm, rising from the swing. What's next, Susan? His flannel sleeves were rolled up, his hands steady from years of fixing engines. Her fingers traced the locket, her mother's initials, E.M., a quiet anchor. I don't know. Her voice was sharp, cracking with fear. She turned, gripping the railing, the wild grass below swaying free in a way she wasn't. You don't get it. My family. They control everything. Who I am. Who I marry. Going back means losing myself. David stepped closer, his boots soft on the wood. Sounds like they've got you in a vice. But running's not freedom. It's just a different trap. His words landed soft, but they stung. She spun to face him, her defiance flaring. What do you know about it? She snapped. You live here fixing cars, no one pulling your strings. You're free. He laughed, short and bitter, rubbing his chin, a faint scar visible. Free? My sister thought running would make her free? Lily. His voice caught, and he glanced at her photo inside, on the shelf. She ran from home, from me. Thought she'd find herself. Found drugs instead. Lost her at 25. Susan's anger dissolved, her chest tightening. David, I'm sorry, she whispered, stepping toward him. The photo, Lily's smile, his warmth, watched them. Her locket felt heavier, her mother's words, live your own life, echoing his. He shrugged, but his shoulders sagged. Point is, running didn't save her. Facing things might have. His gaze met hers unguarded. You're stronger than you think, Susan. Go back. Not to obey them, to fight for you. Her breath hitched, his belief a mirror to her mother's note. Her mother's voice urging courage. She wanted to argue, but his sincerity, His loss, his faith, rooted her. She looked away, the locket her only anchor, then nodded, a slow surrender. "What if I fail?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Then you try again." He moved to the porch's edge, his voice calm. "But you won't know unless you go." Silence fell, thick with possibility. Susan's eyes traced the house, its peeling paint, the quilt in the guest room, the life David had built from grief. She thought of her city penthouse, all cold glass, her father's voice chaining her. David was right. Running hadn't freed her. It had only delayed the fight. "I'll go," she said, the words spilling fast. Her hands steadied, resolve hardening, her mother's courage afire in her chest. "Tomorrow, I'll face them." David's smile was slow, warm. "Good." He reached into his pocket, pulling out the locket's clasp, found in his truck seat. "Fix this up," he said, showing where he'd soldered it, his mechanic's touch precise. "Figured it mattered." She took it, her fingers brushing his, the clasp small but whole. "You fixed it?" Her voice wavered, gratitude swelling. It wasn't just metal, it was her mother's courage, his care, now complete. Seemed important. His eyes held hers, warm, steady. For a moment, the porch was their world. The swings creak, a soft heartbeat. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her posture softening, no longer rigid. "You don't have to." He stepped back, giving her space, his smile lingering. "Just don't run from yourself." She nodded, her heart unsteady but sure. Tomorrow she'd board a bus to the city, face her father, her past. But tonight, on this porch, with David's quiet faith, she felt courage stir. Not freedom, not yet, but the will to claim it. The locket warmed, its clasp secure, and she saw not just a mechanic, but a man who'd carried her through more than a storm. Lily's photo watched, a silent nod to second chances, and Susan knew she'd carry that too. The bus rumbled toward the city, its engine a low growl against the dawn. Susan sat by the window, her locket secure, its clasp fixed by David holding firm. Her borrowed sweatshirt and jeans felt like armor, a shield against the life she was returning to. David's words echoed, "Fight for you." She clutched a scrap of paper with his number, scrawled in his uneven hand. "Just in case," he'd said, glancing at Lily's photo as he handed it to her. Her smile a reminder to help, not lose this time. The city loomed, all steel and glass, its skyline a cage she'd fled. Susan's stomach churned, but her resolve held. She'd used her savings, money hidden from her family years ago, enough for travel and a new start, to buy the bus ticket, her first act of independence. She stepped off the bus, the air sharp with exhaust. Her family's penthouse was blocks away, a tower of control. She walked, her sneakers soft on the pavement, each step a defiance. At the building, the doorman's eyes widened, but he let her pass. The elevator hummed, carrying her to the top. Her father's office awaited, its mahogany door a silent judge. She knocked, her hand steady. "Enter," came his voice, clipped, commanding. He sat at his desk, gray hair immaculate, his suit a boast of power. James stood by the window, his polished smile faltering as she entered. "Susan," her father said, rising, his tone mixing relief and reproach. "You've caused quite a mess." She didn't flinch. "I'm not here to apologize." Her voice was clear, cutting the room's heavy air. James stepped forward, hand outstretched, but she recoiled, her gaze fierce. "Don't!" Her father's jaw tightened. "This marriage is for the family, for stability. You can't just—" "I can." She cut him off, her pulse racing but her will iron. "I'm not a contract. I'm your daughter." The words spilled, raw, years of silence breaking. "Mother wanted me to live my own life. I'm doing that now." James scoffed, but her father's eyes flickered, a crack in his armor. Susan pressed on. "I'm done with your plans. I choose me." Her mother's courage surged, alive in her voice. Her father sat, silent, hands clasped. James stormed out, muttering about wasted time. Later, Susan learned he'd broken the engagement, his family cutting ties to avoid scandal. The room shrank, the air lighter. Her father's gaze softened, just a fraction. "You're like her," he said, almost to himself. "Stubborn." It wasn't approval, but it was enough. She'd won her freedom, fragile but real. She left the penthouse, her mother's note a fire in her chest, the city no longer a cage. At a cafe, she sat, her fingers tracing the locket. She opened it, the clasp David fixed, holding strong, revealing her mother's note. "Be brave, my girl. Live true." Her breath hitched, tears pricking. She hadn't known it was there, hidden all these years. The note was a gift, a tether to her mother's love, but also a question. What now? David's face flashed. His scar, his quiet faith, the way he'd fixed her locket. He'd seen her, not an heiress or runaway, but Susan. The note, her victory, felt incomplete without him. She pulled out his number, her thumb hovering, but didn't call. Not yet. She boarded a bus back to the town, her savings covering the ticket and a small bag of essentials, her past life left behind. The road stretched, cedars a soft welcome, the town's quiet pulse hinting at neighbors who'd soon embrace her. David's house appeared, its sagging porch a beacon. She knocked, her heart loud. He opened the door, his flannel rumpled, his eyes widening. "Susan?" "I did it," she said, her voice trembling but proud. "I faced them. I'm free." She held up the locket, the note inside. "Found this. My mother. She wanted this for me." David's smile was slow, warm. "Knew you had it in you." He stepped aside, letting her in. The kitchen smelled of wood, Lily's photo watching. They sat, the silence easy, their hands close. "I don't know what's next," she admitted, her gaze softening. "But I want to find out. Here." He nodded, his gaze warm. "Then stay." The word was simple, a promise. The locket rested, her mother's note a quiet tether, but David's presence, real, warm, was the deeper pull. She wasn't just free, she was home. The diner's neon sign buzzed, casting a pink glow over the gravel lot. Susan sat across from David in a vinyl booth, the air thick with grease and warmth. Her auburn hair was tied back, her face softened by loose strands, her posture relaxed, a far cry from the tension of months ago. David's flannel was rolled to his elbows, a scar tracing his chin. 3 months had passed since she'd faced her family, and now back in his town, the world felt softer. Hers. She'd arrived that morning, her suitcase light, her mother's note tucked inside her locket. Her father had called once, offering a grudging truce, but no warmth. She'd declined, choosing this town over his world. David had been at his garage, wrench in hand, when she'd walked in. His surprise had melted into a grin, and now in the diner's hum, they talked like no time had passed. "So you really told them off," he said, his voice warm, teasing. "Wish I'd seen it." Susan laughed, the sound free. "Wasn't pretty. My father looked like he'd swallowed a lemon." She sipped her drink, the sharpness grounding her. "James is gone, chasing some new deal. My father's alone in his tower now. They're backing off." David leaned back, his gaze steady. "You did the hard part." His fingers tapped the table, a nervous tick she hadn't noticed before. "This town's like those rescue calls. Messy, but you save who you can." His protective instinct, honed on mountain trails, flickered in his eyes. Her heart skipped, his question heavy. She touched the locket, her mother's courage steadying her. "You," she said, the words slipping out. His eyebrows rose and she flushed, rushing on. "Not just you. This place. The quiet. It's real. I want that." He nodded, his eyes searching hers. "This town's messy. Worth it, though." His voice was low, a shared secret. The diner's clatter, plates clinking, a waitress calling orders, faded, their booth a pocket of stillness, the space between them alive. She recounted the city, her father's grudging respect, James's exit. David listened, his silence a gift. When she mentioned her mother's note, her voice softened. "It was like she was there, pushing me. But you made me believe I could do it." David's hand stilled. "Me? I just gave you a ride and a place to crash." His smile was crooked, but his eyes were serious, a flicker of vulnerability beneath. "Lily would have liked you. She'd have cheered you on." His fingers brushed the table, a ghost of his sister's memory. Susan's chest tightened. "You gave me more than that." She leaned forward, her hands close to his. "You saw me. Not the heiress, not the runaway. Just me." Her throat closed, the locket resting close. She wanted to say more, but the words tangled. Too big for the booth. He looked down, his jaw tight. "Susan, I thought about you. After you left. Wondered if you were okay. If you'd found what you were looking for." His voice was rough, a confession he hadn't planned. "Didn't expect you to come back." Her pulse raced. She'd expected gratitude, maybe friendship, but not this. This raw honesty, his heart mirroring hers. The world narrowed to his scar, his steady presence. "I didn't expect it either," she said, her voice soft. "But I'm here, and I want to stay." His eyes widened, hope breaking through. "Stay!" The word hung, fragile, a question he hadn't dared ask. "What's that look like for you?" She smiled, tentative but sure. "Not just visiting. I want to build something. Here, with you." The locket rested close, her mother's note a fierce echo of this choice. Its call to courage unbroken. She paused, the diner's hum fading, her mother's courage anchoring her. "I'm good with numbers. I've got savings. Money I hid from my family years ago. Enough to seed a business? You're good with cars. Maybe a business?" David's laugh was soft, disbelieving. "You in my greasy garage? You'll hate it." But his eyes danced, the idea rooting. "You're serious. Dead serious." She grinned, their ease electric. The town's quiet hum a promise of community support for their future. "We could make it work." He leaned forward, his hand inches from hers. "And then what? You stick around? Get sick of small-town life?" His tone was light, but his eyes were earnest, seeking a promise. "Then we figure it out," she said, her voice firm. "Together." The word felt like a vow, not just for a business, but for something deeper. Her mother's note, David's faith, her courage. They'd brought her here to this moment. David's fingers brushed hers, a fleeting warmth. "Together's a big word," he said, his voice low. "But I'm in." The waitress dropped the check, breaking the spell. Susan laughed, her cheeks warm. They paid, stepping into the cool night, the neon sign buzzing. The stars gleamed bright, the town quiet. David walked her to his truck, their shoulders close, hands in his pockets, his cap tucked under his arm. "You sure about this?" he asked, pausing by the driver's door. "This town, me. It's not fancy." She looked at him, his scar, the man who'd carried her from a ditch and given her courage. "It's better," she said, her voice steady. "It's home." The truck's engine roared, the road ahead open. Susan's locket rested, her mother's note a quiet tether, but David's presence, real, warm, was the pull she hadn't expected. She'd come for closure, but found a beginning. The auto shop's sign glowed under the dusk sky, Monroe & Co., painted in bold letters. Susan balanced a ledger inside, her hands smudged with grease, her confidence steady, defiance now a quiet strength. David tightened a bolt on a sedan, his flannel sleeves rolled up, his scar faint in the light. The shop drew locals, some knowing David from his rescue days, their trust now in his wrenches and his vow to build a life with Susan. The garage smelled of oil and possibility, their business, 6 months old, thriving. Their bond had deepened too, quiet glances and shared laughs weaving love. Susan closed the ledger, her posture easy. "We're in the black, again." She grinned, tossing him a rag. David caught it, his smile brightening his face. "Your numbers are magic," he said, his voice soft. Their partnership, her savings, his skills, late nights planning, had grown the shop, her hidden funds a bridge from her past. A letter from her father had arrived that morning, formal, distant, a step toward peace. It freed her past, letting her embrace this life fully. He wiped his hands, stepping closer. "Got a surprise." He nodded to the truck. "Come on." She raised an eyebrow but followed, the evening air crisp, cedars humming softly. They drove to the ditch where he'd found her, now a meadow of wildflowers under starlight. Susan glanced at the meadow where she'd once lain broken. Now she stood whole, her breath hitched, the locket resting close. "David, why here?" Her voice was soft, her hand finding his. He parked, turning to her, his cap off, hair flecked with gray. "It's where we started. Seemed right." He pulled a small box from his pocket, his fingers steady, but his voice trembled slightly, bearing the heart he'd once guarded. "Susan, I love you. Marry me." Her chest tightened, then raced. The box opened, a simple silver ring like her locket. Tears pricked, not from wealth, but from him, his strength, his belief. "Yes," she laughed, voice catching. He slid the ring on, his touch warm, and kissed her, soft but sure, the stars their witness. They married there a month later, in that meadow, wildflowers bright. The ceremony was small, townsfolk, a pastor, a table with pie. Susan wore a white sundress, her locket with EM initials resting close, a nod to her mother's courage. David stood in clean flannel, his scar proud. They vowed to build, to heal, to stay. The townsfolk's cheers echoed, their trust a foundation for David and Susan's new life. Lily's photo, brought by a friend, sat on the table, her smile a quiet blessing. After they drove home, the trucks hum a lullaby. Susan's hand rested on his, the ring catching starlight. The shop's sign glowed as they passed, their life etched in its letters. Inside their house, Lily's photo watched, a nod to second chances. Susan touched her locket, her mother's note, "Live true, alive here," fueling the defiance that built this life. She'd have loved this meadow, this life, Susan thought, her heart full. "You okay?" David asked, parking, his voice quiet. His hand squeezed hers, grounding her. "More than okay." Her smile was gentle, her gaze steady. "This is home." The words were an exhale, imperfect but shared. They stepped out, the night wrapping them, their hands brushing, carrying Lily's hope, her mother's defiance, the town's trust, and their love forward. The stars burned bright, the town slept, and their love, hard-won, real, carried them on. The meadow's memory lingered, not a twist, but a truth. They'd begun broken, but together they were whole. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that hope can be found in the most surprising moments, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Heartwarming Love Story. We bring you stories that touch the soul, renew your belief in kindness, and highlight what's truly important in life.